Dustin Baker, VikesNow, the October 10th edition, the day before my birthday. By the time you're watching this, probably will be my 39th birthday. Good to know, huh? 4-1 Vikings sit atop the NFC North. Now they're by themselves. The Packers fell to 3-2. It was glorious. They lost to the Giants somehow in England. And now, because of a bye week and a tiebreaker, the Vikings will live on top of the NFC North for at least 2 weeks, even if they lose the Dolphins game. But before we get into the Dolphins part of the week, which will begin on Wednesday with Josh Fry, we're going to go through the Bears stuff, the reaction, the fallout. And I've got a handful of things to discuss with the group. The first is the nature of victory. I've come to the conclusion, as you probably have, that this is just the way it's going to be for an indefinite period of times. Weird wins. But I'm here to tell you that weird wins are better than weird losses. We encountered weird losses. Well, they're not new. We've done that for a very long time. But in 2020 and 2021, the types of games that have occurred in the last 3 weeks usually would end up in the L column for the Vikings, or maybe a 1-2 record instead of 3-0. So accept this. Embrace it. Plot the times of which perhaps they will improve and get better, but for now, the Vikings are 4-1 because of strange antics, choked away leads, and then manufactured comebacks that are like, woo, relief, rather than, we took care of business and stomped on their necks. They're finding ways to win in Kevin O'Connell's infancy, hell or high water, even if it means looking ugly as hell in the second and especially third quarter, where they've been outscored 33-6 in the first 5 weeks of the season. Three weeks in a row is a trend. I'll say this repeatedly, and I already have said it repeatedly, is that teams can get better, and good teams do get better. Look at the Rams from last year. They looked like shit in November. Then they won a Super Bowl. But right now, you might as well just chalk up each Sunday to being a topsy-turvy roller coaster affair, because if you can't beat the Bears at home when you're up 21-3, if you can't finish that out 31-10 or something, then all of these games are going to be like this. And it comes down to whether or not they're good enough against the good teams to not choke away leads or just stay in it and win at the end. This is the trend. They're going to win ugly, and I guess it works at 4-1. The next item that I must call out is that Kirk Cousins, for the third time in as many weeks, delivered a resounding comeback. This week he even put his own twist on it with a 3rd and 5 scamper. Took it right up the gut of the Bears defense. Looked really hesitant about doing it. It was pump faking all the way. Picked up the first down. And then a couple minutes later, he had a quarterback sneak on the back of Garrett Bradbury, and the Vikings scored, which proved to be the game ender, the last score of the game. But just like I spoke of trends of winning ugly, or at least squandering leads and coming back and manufacturing comebacks, the other trend is that Cousins is the guy in the saddle doing that on offense. And the long-standing criticism about Cousins, aside from the contract and guaranteed money, is that he doesn't deliver when it counts. And he just keeps doing it. And he even did it last year, but the defense wouldn't keep up with his fourth quarter theatrics. So once again, he has delivered against the Bears, a team that he's never really played very well against. They always keep him to this modest stat line. But it doesn't matter. They took care of business at home. And for the third time in 3 weeks, Cousins has one of those precious fourth quarter comebacks that people love to point to as, an arbiter of greatness, even though the leaders of it in the last half decade are Derek Carr and Matthew Stafford, because last time I checked, those guys' teams were always trailing, and that's why the number is inflated. I digress. I previewed this, 2 minutes ago. The third quarters for the Vikings are an absolute mess. The point differential that they have orchestrated in third quarters, meaning how many points they've scored against how many the other team has scored, ranks third worst in the NFL. They're not getting the job done in third quarter, and for some very odd reason, just saving the best for last. Conversely, their fourth quarter differential is fourth best. So it would be really cool if they could just fix the third quarter and stop being the anti-Golden State Warriors and be decent in the third quarter and then turn on the gas in the fourth quarter instead of looking moronic in the third quarter. But that's what's happening. And it really is also an inverse of last year when the game wasn't really in the balance, offense and defense. They tend to play okay under Zimmer in his final year. And then, as you know, you can feel it in your bones in the fourth quarter, especially with the game on the line, the team would collapse. and that would be that. But if they can iron out the third quarter woes, they even tried kicking the ball to the opponent in the third quarter, maybe switch things up. That didn't work. It got worse. The third quarter was miserable yesterday. So if you wanted something to laser focus on for improvement, it would be the third quarter on the whole from all units. Needs a vast improvement. Next is the little bit of worry that you should possess about the kicker. The show was very kind to the kicker throughout the summer because the guy at training camp and preseason, remember the Denver game, looked like a baller. But right now, the Vikings employ a kicker who can't hit from beyond 50 yards. Last season, the same guy was 7 for 9 from 50 yards. That was what he was good at, was hitting from distance. It was the same percentage that Harrison Butker had from the Chiefs in 2021. But now he's flipped the script, and it seems like he's able to hit from inside 50. He's only had a handful of opportunities. I guess he was 5 for 5 in London, so you can't knock the guy too much. But he also had that missed extra point. So I think when we stormed into this season thinking, all right, this kicker, he's doing good things. They have a little bit of a comfort level. You could still have that comfort level, but the guy is not hitting field goals from beyond 50 yards, and it's plaguing him indoors, so you don't even have an excuse of the wind or the grass. It's just not been hunky-dory for Greg Joseph from beyond 50. And that matters a lot because the coaching staff, Kevin O'Connell, when he's calling his plays at the opponent's 40-yard line, we thought we had a guy that, all right, let's trot him out from 57. He should hit about 60% of these. Nope, so far it's 0% of those. So they might opt to go for it on 4th and 4 from the opponent's 40, whereas trotting out a Daniel Carlson or Justin Tucker or Harrison Butker to go drill the bastard from 55. That seems like a long way off now before Joseph can regain that confidence. Next one is Justin Jefferson's targets. For a lot of the 2021 season, I would let the general public know that Justin Jefferson is not under-targeted. He's the most targeted player in NFL history through the first 2 seasons of his career. Nobody else ever has been targeted more in offense than Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins' Vikings offense. Still, folks wanted more. They said, get this guy 15 touches per game. Make him the Cooper Kupp. Remember how many times you read that during the summer, the Cooper Kupp rule? Well, wouldn't you know it, the Vikings are doing that. The sheer number of targets allotted to Jefferson is starting to emulate what the Rams did last year. At the same time, folks are trying to figure out, where's Adam Thielen? This is the trade-off, people. If you're going to give all of the TLC to a guy as good as Justin Jefferson, kind of like the Lions did with Calvin Johnson, there are sacrifices, and that means your favorite hometown story of Adam Thielen is not going to be targeted like he used to be with Diggs in control or with Zimmer distributing the ball to Thielen and Diggs. Right now, if Jefferson's open, Cousins is throwing to him, and that's how the plays are drawn up. So a byproduct of a Jefferson-heavy target load is that your pal Adam and KJ and Irv, they're just not going to be as showcased. Deal with it. That's the comeuppance of doing the Cooper Kupp offense. So I just want to get that out there. And, of course, it worked. Jefferson had 12 catches, 154 yards, didn't score, came this close to doing it, but it's working. So why would you change it? I brought this up on the McKinney Show, the Believe in Vikings, a few minutes ago, actually, that because somehow this team's 4-1 out of the gate, they only have to go 6-6 from now on. This guy wants to settle for mediocrity. No, I'm telling you, the bottom floor right now for Minnesota to get in the postseason is 6-6. They will get in with a 10-7 record, probably the 6th or 7th seed. They won't win the division at 10-7. But if your goal is to get into the playoffs, which is a very reasonable goal for a first-year head coach, all Minnesota has to do for the next, 2.5 months is play 500 football. And you know about 500 football. That's what they've played since the start of 2020. Maybe a little bit under. But, yeah, they just have to alternate wins and losses. If they turn out not to be very good and they're not a team of destiny that's going to race the Super Bowl, at least to get Kevin O'Connell's foot in the door, get playoff experience, you only need to go 500 now. And they'll probably end up being better than that because the schedule isn't too daunting, and all things considered, they're pretty healthy. Second to last here's this idea, and I brought this up on various shows last week, is that suddenly the Vikings can win the division. And you haven't really felt that way since the 2017 season when they actually won it, and then the first month of 2018 when it felt like Cousins was the only thing missing from the puzzle, put him over the top. It's really been about 4 or 5 years since you woke up on a Monday, or really any day, and said, all right, let's go win the NFC North. It was always this little brother bullshit where you're trying to figure out, all right, can we get to 10-7? Can we play second fiddle to Green Bay and sneak in and get a wild card and be one of those teams that runs the gauntlet like Joe Flacco and the Ravens? The Vikings are in a unique position for the first time in a long time where they can win the division. They can host a home playoff game. They've only been one of those at US Bank Stadium, and I bet you remember how it ended. So if they can keep stacking these wins, whether they're pretty, ugly, or in between, they're in the driver's seat to knock off the Packers. And a lot of pundits kind of mentioned that as the season was getting close to starting, is that the fashionable pick was the Vikings to be better than the Packers. Well, it might just be coming to fruition. We shall see. And the last thing I will call out is the weird Miami Odyssey in terms of scheduling. This is kind of goofy. So you remember when the schedule came out in the spring, and you always look at it and you will find all the wins and losses. Everybody does it if you love the game. And then right before the regular season started, or even as week 1 began, when you look at the schedule, you see the Dolphins in Miami. And the Vikings aren't ever gangbusters on the road. But at that time, we thought Tua Tagovailoa was kind of decent. Not going to wreck not going to tear you apart. And that felt like a game that, all right, they should go down to Miami and have a puncher's chance to win it and maybe even pull it out 24-20 or something like that. But when the season started, the Dolphins were the next big thing. They were going to challenge the Bills. Hell, they even beat the Bills. And myself included, it started to look like a game that they were going to go down to Miami and there ain't no way we're winning this one. Well, that's vanquished because of injury. Tua's had the unfortunate back-to-back concussions. I think we can call it that now. And then poor Dolphins, same thing happened to Bridgewater. He slammed his head on the turf. There was like a Zapruder film on whether or not he had a wobble when he was walking, and he was pulled out of the game with the new protocol. That's the downside of the new protocol, is that there is an arbiter now that says, get your ass out of the game, you're not coming back in. Well, that happened to Bridgewater. So now Miami's faced with this very strange odyssey of, well, Tua's probably not ready. We're not going to risk that. But Bridgewater may or may not have had a concussion. If they convince themselves that he didn't, they're going to bring him back against the Vikings. And what if the same thing happens? If he hits his head again, his fingers go haywire, and the Dolphins look like absolute buffoons for not learning from their previous mistake. That's why this week, if there's any debate about Bridgewater playing, right there, it's because they just had this happen. Quarterback, QB1, slams the head against the turf. Everybody looks around and says, nope, he's fine. And then they play him less than a week later. In this circumstance, it would be a week later, and then, just God help Teddy that he doesn't slam his head again. Otherwise, you would have a sequel to what just happened with their concussion stuff. And if it's not Bridgewater, then that game's suddenly winnable because it would be Skylar Thompson or some other dude that they would sign this week, which I don't think they would do, and they'd probably roll with Skylar again, a 7th rounder from Kansas State, and hope for the best. And then it returns to even a more than a winnable game. It should be, if you are a good football team, one that the Vikings take care of business because nobody knows who Skylar Thompson is. So it's been a weird odyssey. All right, I'll run down those real quick just for the list's sake. There's going to be weird wins. We've seen enough now for a month straight. This is just the way that it is. Accept it and pray that they get better along the way, where some of these could start to be romps. Kirk Cousins delivers again each and every time he steps on the field, except for the Eagles game. He's showing that, all right, he's got the clutch gene, which people used to try to savage him for and still do. Third quarters are a mess. They've been outscored 33-6. God help them. They need to fix it. There is a reason to be concerned or quasi-panicked about Greg Joseph because he suddenly can't hit from 50 yards, and you'll need him to do that before too long, and especially if they get to the playoffs. Justin Jefferson is now targeted like a madman in his Cooper Kupp role, and if you're sad that Adam Thielen isn't getting targets, tough shit. This is how it goes. The Vikings just need to go 6 of 6 the rest of the way to get into the postseason and see what happens. Anything other than that is gravy and a bonus to win the NFC North. The division is suddenly winnable because the Packers don't feel like another 13-win team, maybe 11-6. 12-5, but the Vikings could take the division for the first time since 2017. And the strange Dolphins Odyssey can win the game. No way we're beating this 3-0 team. Now they've got something called Skylar Thompson. We can win it again. I'll be back tomorrow to go over some of the surprises from the Bears game. And then the day after that, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, we'll dive into the Dolphins preview. And Skull, baby.